sends Christ, who is not a human, but a vision, an illusion, to redeem humanity and to save humanity from being enthralled by the material world. So God, in fact, sends an image, which is the Son of God, down there to, in a sense, save mankind. Jesus does not die in the cross, which is why the Cathars hate representations of the cross, and they hate churches as well, because they are representations of the material world, whereas the true world is that of the Spirit. So they believe also that, and this is unclear too, that one of the ways in which man is created by the devil, of course, and God, in pity for them, gives them a soul. And it is not clear about where these souls come from. Are these the souls of fallen angels? Or do they believe also in the transmigration of souls? So that there is a belief also in transmigration as well. So you could see how this, in fact, differs tremendously from Christianity as well. Satan as the evil god, free, and then the question is to free oneself from the flesh, so that the perfecti refuse to kill, to take oaths, in a sense they stand apart. We also know that socially, a good number of the Cathars are people who know how to read and write, that they come from the kind of middling sorts, the lower nobility, the mercantile classes. We know also that the Cathars allow women to play a role in the religion which is forbidden to them within Christianity. So in a sense what we have here is a religion which is wide open, which allows people to come in and to play a role in it which is not possible in the highly hierarchical world of the Catholic Church. And they span. And the truth of the matter, of course, is that the Catholic Church in the South doesn't really, in the Languedoc, in Occitania, doesn't really worry about this. Okay, you live, we all have wine, this is Provence after all, the weather is wonderful, the wine is terrific, the Mediterranean is right there, why worry? But, some people are going to come through Occitania on their way elsewhere, and they are going to worry. And this is what happens. A man named Dominic of Guzman, a native of Castile, we know him in history as Saint Dominic, comes through, as do all the priests and monks traveling through the south, and are shocked by the way in which the area is essentially in the grip of heresy. And they come to the Pope and ask permission to go and preach to these heretics and try to bring them back into the fold. It is then that the mendicant order, a second mendicant order, that of the Dominicans, is created. Dominicans not because they are the followers of Saint Dominic, Dominicans because they are the hounds of the Lord, Dominus Canis, the hounds of the Lord. And they come there to convince, because as we shall see in the lecture which follows this one, this is a period in which the church tries to bring heretics back before they are excluded altogether and severed from the religion by preaching, not necessarily by violence. And so the Dominicans come into the south to preach Christianity to the heretics and are not very successful. And in fact, there are some encounters between Dominicans and heretics, leading to the killing of one of the Dominicans, or one of the papal legates who is in the area, representing, as it were, the position of the Pope. And thus something unique in the history of the West takes place here, which is that the Pope, Innocent III, preaches a crusade against the Cathars. This is a golden opportunity for the people in the north of France to embrace a religious cause and to come south and attempt to extend the power into the south to integrate this area of Occitania, which was not part of France, that is to say, politically not integrated into the Kingdom of France, and to bring it into the Kingdom of France by using religion. It was not lost on the people of the South that this crusade, preached in the name of religion and as a way to combat heresy, was in fact a political move as well. And Catholics and Cathars fought side by side against the invaders. And the King of Aragon and Catalonia, the King of the Crown of Aragon, Peter, who was known as Peter the Catholic, came to defend the South against the invaders from the north. And he died at Muret in 1213, fighting on the side of the Cathars. The story is told that at Béziers, one of the towns in the area, after it is conquered by the Northerners, they are told, how do you distinguish between the Cathars and the Christians? How could you tell them apart? And the leader of the occupying forces put all of them to the sword. God will know his own when they get up there. Kill them up. God will know who is right and who is wrong. And therefore, the Cathar heresy is squashed by these invaders from the north and essentially by the papal crusade. It is the first time in which a crusade is preached not against quote-unquote infidels in the East, but a crusade is preached against people who are Christians but heretical. In the next lecture, I will describe in luxury of details how you deal with the Cathars who still remain alive after a fashion, after the invasion. And that will be by way of the Inquisition. Let me point out to you very briefly how Catharism survived. If one reads Emmanuel Leroy-Ladurie, great book Montaigu, which is the promised land of error, you could see that how in this small village in the Pyrenees, or close to the Pyrenees, Montaigu, Cathar beliefs survived, so that almost half of the population of this village are really people who still practice Catharism, who travel back and forth across the Pyrenees, who go back and forth and who maintain this network of heretical views, how heresy survives 100 years, 150 years after the defeat of the Cathars in Languedoc. The third and final movement that I want to look at is very briefly is that of the Fraticellis and the Flagellants. Francis, as I pointed out to you, was a great watershed in the history of Christianity. Everyone, not everyone, but most people, specifically the people at the bottom, were certain that Francis essentially was the second coming of Jesus. He had received the stigmata. He has 12 disciples. So that essentially the order splits between two groups. One, the radical Franciscans, whom we call Fraticellis, and two, the observant or regular Franciscans, who have the new reform order about which I spoke in the past. The Fraticellis see Francis as a sign that the end of time is at hand. Together with the ideas of Joachim of Fiore, everybody thought that 1260 will mark the end of time, the beginning of the millennium. And because it was the beginning of the millennium, and all the signs were there that the millennium was at hand, you have the development of the flagellant movement. People who will go around beating in groups of 33, beating their backs into a pulp, by their suffering, in a sense, bringing about the end of time, the end of history, which has been foreshadowed by the life of Francis. The flagellants, the church doesn't know what to do with the flagellants, because after all, they are on the one hand orthodox, and then at the end they are condemned also as heterodox, and they are forbidden, because they represent a great threat. And the orthodox view of the millennium is, of course, that you cannot usher it in, and that you cannot predict when it will happen, that you cannot say, I know when it will happen, that it is only in the mind of God who knows when the millennium will take place. Thank you.